Let's take a closer look at the thug character. Now I'll explain to you what we must do in order to add a new fire spot. If you remember, we already had gotten the values for the limb rotations and positions for the TF341 parent and child fire spot limbs. So we will need to use these values. The first thing we need to do is select the thug's original fire spot and then rename it. To rename it, we click on the Edit drop-down menu and then select Rename Selected Limb. I renamed it to left_FS. Do not use the word fire spot in renaming the limb because this will confuse Animer. Now we need to add the parent limb for our new fire spot. We first must select the right hand of the thug. Now we select Add Fire Spot from the Edit drop-down menu. Since this is actually the Prop 1 limb, we will be adding the limb rotations and positions of the Prop 1 limb of the TF341 character. After we fill in the values, we then click on OK. And then we need to make sure that fire spot is selected and then rename it to BIP01_Prop1. Although it should already be selected, we need to make sure that BIP1_Prop1 is a selected limb. It does look that way, but I just want to make sure. We will now add our new fire spot, so select Add Fire Spot and fill in the values. We now have a new fire spot for the thug that will correspond to the TF341's animation. We can see this by viewing the limb's hierarchy. You will notice under the left hand we renamed the fire spot to left FS, and now under the right hand we have a new parent called BIP1_Prop1 and the new fire spot. Once we add the fire spot, we can then import all of the animations from the TF341 character. Make sure that the thug's selected frame is at 0. This is the T position for the thug. Also make sure that the frame count is also 0. The default is 1, and so we need to change it to 0. This is very important as we want the defined animations in the TF341 FPE file to be exactly the same for the thug, so that we can just make a copy of the TF341 FPE for the thug. This way we can use the scripts created for the TF341 characters as well without modifying them. From the File drop-down menu, we need to select Import Animations from DirectX or DBO file, and then load one of the TF341 DirectX files. And we will load the repaired one. Eventually we will see a window which is divided into 3 panels. I will pause the recording now and start it again when it is done processing, as it will take a little while. The left panel, Imported Structure, is limb information from the imported character. So this is what displays the structure of the limbs in the TF341 model. If the limb's name is in bold font, this is a non-animated limb. The middle panel, Corresponding Limbs, is composed of 2 columns. In the column Imported Limbs are placed the names of all animated limbs of imported TF341 models. Each of these limbs should be attached to a corresponding limb of the thug character. Animer tries to do this automatically, guided by the names of the limbs. In the column Character Limbs are placed the thug limbs with a similar name to the imported limbs. You can see that the thug has a slightly different construction of the torso than the TF341. The thug doesn't have a BIP1 _ spine 3 limb, as you can see here. So what do we need to do about the fact that there is a BIP1 spine 3 animation for the TF341 model? We need to attach the BIP1 spine 3 to the BIP1 spine 2 of the thug. This will enable the importation of the TF341 animations of BIP1 spine 2 and BIP1 spine 3 to the BIP1 spine 2 limb of the thug. To do it, select the BIP1 spine 3 in the column Imported Limbs of the corresponding limbs. Then in the right panel, Character Structure, select the BIP1 spine 2 and then click on Attach. You can now see that spine 2 is connected to spine 3. Before we click the OK button, we should correct the offset scale factor to 0.8. Now click the OK button. This window will show, and to make sure that we check if the both characters are the same pose. And of course they're about as close as we can get them. And so we'll click on OK here, and then I am going to pause the recording and come back to it when it's done processing. All of the TF341 animations have now been imported to the Thug. I had mentioned in the tutorial of the sitting animation that there can be some differences in the limbs of the Thug. For example, the forearms needed to be lowered for the Thug's sitting position to make the animation a little more believable. Of course, you can do that with Animer by rotating the offending limb until it is the way you would like it to be. But what about the Thug holding a TF341 weapon? Will it look okay as is, or will we need to make adjustments? The first thing we can do is actually attach or glue the weapon to the Thug's new fire spot, and then run the animations to see if it looks okay. To really make sure if the animations are working the way we want them to when running TF341 scripts, we will need to place the Thug inside a level. I'll get to that in a little bit, but first let's glue the weapon to the Thug's hand. So I'll click on the Edit drop-down menu item and then select Glue Gun to Fire Spot. This is where the VWEP mesh comes in. Or if you've renamed it, then select that particular weapon mesh. And all of the weapon meshes for the TF341 character needs a texture if you want to see it textured rather than being all white. This is why I included the texture for the gun in the working folder. You can't see it here, but I did mention that earlier. And so here is the weapon. Now we can just simply click on play to watch the Thug go through all of the TF341 animations. Remember, not all of the animations are for the character holding a type of rifle as the Thug has now. There are certain animations for a different type of weapon, such as a pistol. Also, there are animations that where the character is not holding a weapon. We are now done importing the animations, and we need to save the character with a different name. Of course, it can be any name you like. I just made it easy on myself and named it Thug _ TF341. You can save it in either the DirectX or DBO format. I would save it in the DirectX format because DBOs have a tendency to be eradicated at times, especially when one runs the FPS cleaner. You can go ahead and save it in the Animer working folder if you like, and then move it to the Thug subfolder. This is what I usually do. I will let this run a little bit longer. Because this is somewhat of a close-up and enlarged, that you can see that there are it seems to be some positioning to the right hand that might be a little off, as it seems like the right hand does go through the weapon. However, you may decide this is okay. If not, then you need to reposition the weapon to the right hand until you like the position. However, it may not be so bad because the character will be usually a little further away in play, within the level, and it might be acceptable. Again, we need to actually look at it in the level before we make that decision. I will now end. As you see, the sometimes the weapon may not look right because of the kind of weapon that he's actually supposed to be holding for that animation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. So now how can we make this character FPSC ready? It's quite simple actually, especially if you remembered to make sure that the frame count was set at 0. That was very important. The very first thing we need to do in order to make this FPSC ready is to copy the TF341 FPE file to the World War II thug or character subfolder. The character that I used was the 14B in the enemy team 2 subfolder. So I copied it over to the World War II character folder. And then we needed to rename that folder to the same name that we renamed it, the mesh file, to thug underscore TF341, which is the FPE folder. Now open up that file and your favorite text editing file. I of course use FPI Edit Pad. First thing you might want to do is change the description. Again, we can use thug underscore TF341. We will want to leave the AI files the same as the TF341 character, but we will need to change the mesh name, and it's in the same folder as the FPE folder or file, so we just need to modify this a little bit. You might find you will want to change the scale, but we'll leave it as is for the moment. The next thing we need to do is delete the texture N and the texture S files, and then change or modify the texture for the thug. I use the thug number 4 texture, and so this is what we need to use here. It's thug underscore 4 underscore D2. The effect bank, the effect, we could possibly use this, but the thug is is normally the bump bone, and so we should change it to bump bone to make sure that he doesn't disappear or anything. We'll leave the weapon as is and everything else as is. Now, if we wouldn't have changed the frame count to 0, then we would be off by 1 on all of the animations, and there are a lot of them. So we should not have to worry about changing that, any of the animations. So now we go ahead and save it, especially if you've already renamed it. And we're just about ready to go. We now have the Thug TF341 FPE file and the DirectX file. There's one other thing we can do, otherwise it will the icon that shows up in the library will be the default icon. We can actually take one of the BMP files, and let's use the unarmed thug. You can copy that. That isn't exactly what I wanted to do. We can copy the file and then paste it, and of course it adds automatically the word copy. Then we can rename this to the thug underscore thug TF341, no spaces there, BMP, and then we will have the 3 necessary files for us to use within a level.